Good morning, Brian.
Hey, Colin, how you doing?
Good, thanks. That is a real...
Colin, are you working with Pedro, the new PM?
I do. I mean, yes, as relates to the Blackstone and to the other. Yes.
I got to return his call. He called me late last week. I'll give him a buzz and I'll circle back with you after.
Perfect. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Counselor. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here, Carlton.
Absolutely.
Morning, Counselor.
Morning, Brian.
How are you?
Good. Okay. And I see we've been joined by Counselor Flynn. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Kenzie. Apologize for being late.
No, Ed, you're the first one here besides me, so
Okay.
it's all relative. And we're still waiting on Nate, right, on the admin side?
Yes, he should be joining.
No worries. We're also and getting an estimate. I didn't think there could be a meeting before this, but Councillor Edwards is just testifying at an energy facilities siting board meeting, so she may be a little late too. But I see we've been joined by Councillor Sabi George. Morning, Anissa, and there's Nate.
Good morning.
Nate, I never know what you actually prefer. Nate, Nathan.
Those are both great.
I mean, it's your name.
It's true. You can call me Nate or Nathan. I really don't care.
Okay.
It's good. I usually, if I write it, you usually see it written as Nathan, but
Right.
I go by Nate.
Okay.
I've been called, it's budget season, so I've been called a lot of things that are much worse than that.
Yeah, as someone who goes through a shortened form of my middle name, I'm sensitive to this question. So, all right. Let me I'm gonna pull up my notes on this. And I know you guys sent a deck over. Is somebody going to be prepared to share that?
Yeah, I can share my screen if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's always easiest. I mean, not yet, obviously, but I think it's easiest if the person doing it does it. I mean, our staff can, but. Okay. All right, just mindful of everyone's time. I think we're gonna get going. I know we're, Councillor Edwards very much wants to be here and is also stuck at this other meeting. So, but I'm grateful for you all to being here, and I think we will get moving. Carrie, actually, is it Carrie or Candace running this morning? Are we all set on that side?
Good morning. Yep, it's Carrie. We're ready to go when you are.
Okay, great. I think we should get going. So I'm calling this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the chair of the City Council's Committee on Ways and Means. I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Councilor Ed Flynn from District 2 and Councilor Anissa Sabi George at large. The topic of today's hearing is Docket 0194, message and order approving an appropriation of $306,000 for the purpose of paying for costs of a feasibility study and schematic design work associated with the boiler and window replacement projects at the following schools: Samuel Adams Elementary School and the Patrick J. Kennedy Elementary School, for which the City of Boston may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, said amount to be expended under the direction of the Public Facilities Department on behalf of Boston Public Schools. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It's also broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. We'll be taking public testimony at the end of the hearing. So if you wish to testify via video conference, please email Michelle, MICHELLE, .a.goldberg, GOLDBERG, at boston.gov to sign up. When you're called, we ask you to state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments can be heard. You can also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.wm@boston.gov. That's ccc.wm, that says in ways and means, at boston.gov. For panelists, we're joined here today by Nate Cooter, the Chief Financial Officer from Boston Public Schools, Brian McLaughlin, Director of Capital Planning from Boston Public Schools, and Carlton Jones, the Assistant Director of Operations for the Public Facilities Department. We've also been joined by my colleague, Councilor Michael Flaherty at large. Before I go to the panel, I just want to check if councilors want to just briefly say hello this morning. Councilor Flynn?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you to you, Madam Chair, and to Brian and Carlton and Nate for excellent work that you've been doing, providing the best services and opportunities for our children in BPS through these types of programs, working closely with the state government, with Treasurer Goldberg's office as well. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panelists for their exceptional work.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. And I'm going to take out of order. I hadn't seen that the district councilor from District 1, Councilor Lydia Edwards, has joined us as well. Since the two schools we're talking about today are in her district, I'm going to let her go next in the opening order.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to go ahead and let folks know I'm balancing this in another Zoom, so I'll be in and out. But I do want to thank you, Councilor Bach, for hosting this hearing as soon as possible. When I saw the funds come up, this is something I want to completely take advantage of for the schools that desperately need upgrades in their infrastructure, making sure that we get the windows that we need, the boilers, and updated, especially at this moment. And also because, to be very frank, we're all hopeful that the schools will be open by this fall. And we want to make sure that everything is set and ready to go, and the kids are in the safest positions possible. So I am excited about this. I want to thank the chair for doing this as soon as possible. You, of course, have my full support. I will again be balancing now, going back to testify at another hearing and then coming back to this Zoom. But if you have any questions for me, just know that I just appreciate your prioritizing this as soon as possible. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Asabi-George? Any comments? Oh, sorry. I got a note from her. No comments. Councilor Flaherty, do you have any opening comments?
Morning, Madam Chair. Also, just to add, East Boston's a great neighborhood. Schools in dire need of these repairs, and now's the time to get it done while kids are remote and we have the opportunity to get in there and get the job done quickly. So we'll support the chair's recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Flaherty. All right. I think then we're ready to go to our panel, who I should have asked before we started, but Carlton, Nate, Brian, who's going to go first?
I'll be presenting.
Fantastic. Again, this is Brian McLaughlin, the Director of Capital Planning for Boston Public Schools and formerly of our Public Facilities Department. So knows both sides of the house. Brian, go ahead.
All right. Please let me know when I am sharing.
We can see your screen and now, perfect. Oh, except now there's a, yeah, now it's gone. Now we see the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Bach and other councilors this morning for attending the hearing for the Accelerated Repair Program with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. The Massachusetts School Building Authority is the state authority that oversees the funding of public school construction projects in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The MSBA is a reimbursement agency and works with local communities to create affordable, sustainable, and energy efficient schools across Massachusetts, and is funded through 1 penny of the Massachusetts sales tax. MSBA has 2 programs: the core program, which focuses on major construction projects, including new builds, major renovations, and major repairs. Examples of this would be the Dearborn School, Boston Arts Academy, Josiah Quincy Upper School, and the Carter School. And the Accelerator Repair Program, which is for facilities in which the scope of work is limited to the replacement of roofs, windows, and boilers. These repair projects are designed to materially extend the useful life of a school that is otherwise capable of supporting the required educational program. ARP focuses on the preservation of existing assets by performing energy efficient and cost-saving upgrades, which will result in direct operational savings for school districts. This slide provides a little background on the collaborative efforts between the MSBA and the city to date. The MSBA was created in 2004 to oversee school construction projects. From 2004 to 2014, there was limited collaborative efforts between the city and the MSBA. In total, 5 projects were completed with a reimbursement of just under $6 million. Since 2014, Mayor Walsh has made it a priority to leverage state funds on school projects. Since 2015, with the help of the City Council, the city has completed 24 projects, with an additional 3 projects being approved by the MSBA that will go into construction this summer. The 27 approved projects represent $71.6 million in total project costs, with upwards of $41.4 million coming back to the city in reimbursement. In addition, the city and the MSBA have collaborated on several large-scale new build projects that result in an additional $182.7 million in reimbursement within the core program. In total, since 2015, the city has been approved for $477 million in capital project costs by the MSBA. Today, we're here to request $306,000 to bring on an owner's project manager and architect to start the design on the windows at the Adams School and the boiler at the Patrick J. Kennedy Elementary School. The 2020 ARP submission process opened in January of 2020 and closed in mid-February of 2020. MSBA received 90 Accelerator Repair Program requests. Submissions were reviewed from February to this past fall. Communication out to districts usually happens in the spring of the same filing year. However, this year's process was impacted and delayed by COVID. These 2 projects were voted into feasibility study phase of the MSBA Accelerator Repair Program at the MSBA board meeting this past December. Next steps. Upon successful appropriation votes of the City Council, MSBA will assign a consultant team of an OPM and architect to this project. We anticipate design to start this spring, with the project to be bid in late 2021, early 2022. Construction is anticipated for the summer of 2022. The one caveat being the window project. The design time with windows and the lead time associated with fabricating windows usually bumps window projects out to a second summer. So there is possibility that the window project at the Adams School may go into construction of 2023. Our goal obviously would be for it to happen next summer, but we just want to make sure that people are aware that it may be bumped to 2023 if we can't have the windows designed and fabricated in a timely manner. This final slide kind of gives an overview of what has been approved and completed to date. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Great, thank you so much. So were these 2 schools part of the, I'm sorry, I should have pulled up the hearing from around this time last year, but were they part of the set of 6 or whatever that we sent to the MSBA?
Yes, we submitted 11 schools last year, and 2 moved forward into the program. We received a letter back from the MSBA that with the high number of submissions that they received this year, they only allocated $50 million for all ARP projects. So going into the Accelerated Repair Program, they have certain parameters that schools need to hit for submission. And that is roofs and boilers have to be 25 years old and windows need to be 30 years old. With the high number of submissions they received, they increased the years on those. So roofs and boilers had to be at least 30 years old and windows needed to be 35 years old. And that delta made a lot of the projects that we submitted this year
Ineligible.
eligible for the program.
And do we think that that uptick in applications, because obviously it occurred in February, right? So prior to COVID. So do we think that that reflects a new normal of, I mean, you just illustrated the fact that we weren't really using this program and then we sort of like have caught up to trying to maximize it. And I mean, my concern, I mean, and it's a good thing for the school children of Massachusetts, but my concern would be that maybe everyone else is also catching up and getting more on top of it. Because if it were later, I would have thought, oh, maybe it's COVID related. Everyone has worried about their windows, but that seems like that can't be the explanation for this.
No, I know in 2019, MSBA also received over 80 ARP submissions. And again, that year they adjusted the timeframes of eligible projects. The one thing they didn't do in 2019 is they didn't move any window projects forward that year. I think it was based upon the large number of window submissions and in the costs associated with the window projects being higher than the other two scopes of work. That being said, I would think that this year's ARP submissions may have a higher number of window requests just based upon everything that's happened since the last submission process was opened.
But in 2019, didn't we get a bunch more projects approved?
In 2019, we submitted 3. We were approved for 3 projects. Based upon that year's submission, the Curly, the Mary Lyon, and the McKinley.
Okay.
The highest year we received approvals for was 2015, 2016. We had like 6 and 7 approvals.
Got it. So but I'm just trying to square that with, because when I look at this chart that we've got up, it looks more like, for instance, all those Feb 2015 ones. It just looks like more than like on this, it suggests that we for instance had 6 in 2017, that we had 5 in 2016. So, and 6 in 2015?
6 in 2015, yeah. Yes.
And then another 6 in 2018. So we just think this is the new normal where we're only going to get 2 or 3?
I don't know, to be honest. I think we have to figure out work closer with the MSBA to identify what they'll be expecting from the city of Boston. I would like to think that we could, with our large inventory, I think they have been willing to work with us on moving forward several projects in 2019 and 2020, maybe a result of just the high number of requests throughout the Commonwealth and them looking to kind of spread the money throughout the state. Again, we put forward schools that we know fit the parameters and we feel rise to the level of need that would be appropriate for this program, and we'll continue to do so. They haven't yet opened up the 2021 SOI process, but we're working to identify schools right now for review within BPS to submit several more this year in hopes of capturing as many schools as possible for this program.
Okay, so that was also my question. So then this year's process is delayed because wouldn't we usually already have?
Yes, I believe they're going to be opening up in the spring. I haven't heard a definitive date, but I checked in with the MSBA last week, and I think it's going to be sometime in March or April.
Okay. Got it. And yeah, I mean, I guess my concern is just that it seems like when they get more projects than they anticipate, they sort of make up an arbitrary criteria in order to cut the numbers down, right? Like 1 year eliminating windows, 1 year adding 5 years, and there's a randomness to kind of, I mean, it seems hard for us to anticipate that approach.
Yeah, if I could, Brian, if you don't mind if I jump in, I think I'm relatively new to this. And I think one of the things that I've sort of observed with the MSBA is, and this is a challenge we have with sort of finance and Boston in general, is that like with 50 other towns and cities that are much smaller than we are, they, state agencies try and think about spreading things out. And so they look at the total dollar amount probably that comes to Boston and think, we've supported them enough, as opposed to a per pupil sort of allocation view. And so I just think that there's some conversations we need to have about the MSBA about how to work with them better as their largest district with the largest inventory, to make sure we're at the top. But I think it's also a sign of like starting for us to have, during the Walsh administration, really dug ourselves out of a hole when it comes to these projects. I mean, there were so many buildings that we were looking at that needed roofs, boilers, and windows, and we've started to make great progress. Obviously, we have a lot of work still to do, but when you look at an eligibility criteria, our list is getting shorter as the years go on, and we also need to have sort of a predictable schedule for us in the PFD's capacity, in our district's capacity, to be able to move these projects forward. So I do think we're starting to see a leveling off of the number of projects we're going to do every year. Some of it's constraints from the MSBA, and some of it's just our own sort of now getting on a more predictable schedule of repairs across all of these categories, which is where we want to be as a district as well.
Great. Thank you. I think I'm going to go now to my colleagues' questions. I have a few more, but I want to get to other folks. So again, I'm just going to give precedence here to Councillor Lydia Edwards from District 1, because it happens that the MSBA in its wisdom has chosen 2 schools in her district. So I'll let her go first, and then we'll go in order of arrival. So it'll be Councillor Sabi George, Councillor Flaherty, and then we've also been joined by Councillor Liz Braden from District 9. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. And I apologize. Some of these questions are happening because I literally just left the EFSB hearing specifically on the substation in East Boston. So I'm back here to deal with the schools. So I apologize. If you could walk me through the timeline specifically for some of the infrastructure. Also, in terms of the analysis to pick specifically these schools. I have other schools. I'd love to get some of this infrastructure upgrade. And what's the likelihood of getting some of them on the pipeline specifically to get some of these upgrades as well. So that's where I'll start. And I apologize again if you've already addressed this. I literally just went from one to the other.
Sure. So I'll answer a couple of those. Right now, what we're doing with the appropriation of the City Council, that will allow us to have money to bring on an OPM and an architect, which will start design probably this spring, 2021.
Okay.
With the goal of having these projects in construction for the summer of 2022. I think that's more realistic for the boiler at the PJK.
Mm-hmm.
Window projects usually take a little longer to design and then actually get the fabrication of the windows complete. So our goal would be to hit 2022 for the windows at the Adams, but there is potential that the construction of that could be bumped out to 2023. We'll have a better idea of that probably later 2021 when the design is a little farther along in the process. Sure.
Just to note, one of the frustrations that we got when we got brand new windows at the McKay and other schools is that while we really needed them, they didn't meet this moment of a pandemic where we needed ventilation. So they opened kind of from the top this way. And we had ceiling fans that actually just come horizontal at the bottom. So they were practically useless. And I'm curious in the design and the looking at of windows coming up, how this pandemic and this moment is going to inform all of our upgrades going forward. What new analysis are we going to implement to make sure that we can meet the moment?
Councilor Edwards, good morning. I can speak to that a little bit. Carlton Jones from PFD. So for instance, we just had a windows project also in your district at the Otis. And one thing that I want to make sure that you know is that because of the pandemic, we actually modified the window opening at the Otis to be more conducive to current times. So the windows were designed to have stops that only allowed a certain amount of air passage, largely because of safety. So the window, without getting into the weeds, but it was like a 3-inch gap, and you could barely get your hand through, and the situation there. We went through and retrofitted the windows to remove those stops in conjunction with Boston Public Schools and the principal to ensure that the windows would open up to their maximum opening, and it still provides safety. It's one of those situations where you don't want to leave a room unattended because kids could potentially get themselves into difficulty. And there were a couple of windows that we actually in the hallway that we decided not to remove the stops on, just because there was a kind of a natural ladder where one could climb up to get to the window, and because of the radiator covering. So we decided to not remove those stops at the ends of the halls. But in the classrooms and in the offices, we did literally take out all of the window stops to accommodate the new situation, trying to provide more ventilation. So going forward, that's going to be a consideration in the design.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Edwards, are those all your questions?
That was it.
Great, fantastic. Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I apologize for not tuning in a little bit earlier for opening statement. Just, I guess very quickly, just 3 cheers for doing this work. For too long, we didn't take advantage of MSBA money, and just excited that we're getting to it. I am curious about the consideration around renewable energy and sort of how that influences any of the design options on any of the pieces of MSBA, not just specific to what we're talking about today, but is that incorporated into the planning of the work that's before us, but sort of the work generally?
Okay, I can take that one again. Good morning,
Thank you,
Councilor.
Carlton.
Hi. So as you know, the Wallace administration had an ordinance that came through your body that passed relative to zero net carbon. And so for all of our new projects, we're making sure that those standards are being adhered to. There's a design effort that's involved to ensure that the building is zero net energy. Those do not so much relate to these projects because it's more about the source of fuel, et cetera. But going forward, absolutely, that is definitely a consideration for the projects. And again, for these, not so much, although, we want to make sure that we have high efficiency and high efficiency boilers. And that's what we've been getting for a while anyway. Right now, as you know, Boston Public Schools is a gas fed system. And so right now there are natural gas boilers. We haven't converted to all electric as of yet. However, like I said, in our new projects with zero net energy, we're looking at how we can convert our energy systems.
Great, thank you for that. I am, just a big supporter of these efforts because it's important to take advantage of funds where we can and do the repairs that are long overdue for too many of our schools. But we'll be supporting this, Madam Chair, and look forward to listening into the rest of the hearing. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Sabi George. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, it's first of all, I want to commend the Walsh administration for taking advantage of the Mass School Building Assistance. Unfortunately, the previous administration did not do that. And it was always sad. I'd see several treasurers during my time, I'd see them at events and they would always ask me why Boston was not applying. So I know that there's now a waiting list, if you will, or the criteria sort of changes as we're going through the flow. But the fact that we're competing for these very precious dollars to get these repairs is commendable and should have happened a long time ago. So thanks to the administration for putting their best foot forward here and putting Boston in the opportunity to get a shot at some of these funds. So with that, the more of these we can apply for, the better. Had we applied earlier in the 90s and in the 2000s, and some of our buildings would not be in the shape and the condition that they're in. So again, I put that back on the previous administration. So look forward to supporting these, and hopefully we can see more of them and get us in the pipeline for more repairs and upgrades, because our school fleet, it's aging, and we need all the help we can get with respect to getting these buildings up to snuff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Braden.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm really here to learn more about the whole MSBA process, and I have questions for Nathan and offline. I hope to set up a meeting and discuss that. But just back to the issue of the pipeline in terms of, I know we have an incredible number of schools in our city that need repairs. How do facilities advance on the pipeline, or how do you prioritize projects in the pipeline for attention?
Sure. So in regards to the capital project for BPS, there's really two streams of the capital project. There's projects that are funded independent of MSBA, and then there's projects that are funded through that we look to work with MSBA for the funding. MSBA has certain requirements for the accelerated repair program. The roof, windows, and boilers must be at least 30 years old. Windows must be 35 years of age. The cost has to be over $250,000. The school can't be overcrowded. The building must be used for educational purposes, so it can't be an administrative office. The scope of work is limited to, again, just roof, window, and boiler systems, nothing beyond those three scopes of work. So that's really when we look to put a school in for consideration with the MSBA, we need to make sure it fits those criteria for the repair program. There's also another stream of work through BPS Capital that we look to identify schools that are in need of any number of repairs that may go beyond roof, windows, and boilers. But we have a separate repair program where we look to address schools that do present needs to their building systems and that may impact their educational environment. So we try to address those as soon as possible through the MSBA, through the City of Boston Capital Program.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have for now.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Braden. And a few more questions from me. If colleagues can just raise your blue hands or text me if you have a second round of questions, because otherwise we'll go to public testimony after I ask mine. But could you guys speak to, I don't think I saw on the spreadsheet what the overall value of the two projects is anticipated to be. Obviously, right now we're approving an appropriation for the 306 for the design, but what's the size of these two projects overall?
I wouldn't want to give an estimate right now, just because we wouldn't have that until we have the OPM design team on board to work forward through the design. We'd likely have that probably later in, again, late 2021, when they've been able to get into the buildings and go through their process and identify what boiler system and window system they'll be bringing to those two buildings. Based on other schools of similar, like the Otis building that was just recently completed, that overall window project was just under $3 million. And the boiler project at the Mary Lyon, which is moving forward, which is kind of a smaller school, that's a $2 million project. So in all likelihood, this would be maybe $3 to $4 million, maybe even upwards of $5 million for total project cost between the two.
Got it. But surely, so the MSBA, I mean, they must have some back of the envelope cost estimation device as they figure out how many of these projects they can fund.
They may. I know that they have allocated $50 million. So during the life of the MSBA project, there's two times where you need to appropriate funds. You bring on this initial funds, which we're going for today, would bring on the OPM and architect, as I mentioned. Then the second time you appropriate funds is when the schematic design is complete, when they have a better understanding of what the scope, schedule, and cost will be for that entire project. And that's when they move forward with the overall appropriation and approval of what they feel the cost of the project would be. That's when, again, we'll come back to this body for a second time for these two projects to look to appropriate funds for the balance of the cost of the construction. I think MSBA also brings in, they move forward projects at different times relative to their board cycle. So they may move projects forward, some at over a course of 3 MSBA board meetings, which is a span of 6 months. So I'm not sure if that's how they adjust and kind of and move forward projects when they know that they'll be able to move forward with their funding.
And but if these two projects together, I'm just thinking about Nate's comment in terms of proportionality. Like, it seems like we might be looking at these two projects being something in the realm of 5 of those, of that 50 million. I'm just thinking about Boston as 10% of the state's population. Obviously, this would be skewed if we thought about school children, and then it's also skewed if you think about number of buildings, which I think we have a disproportionate number of. But like, I'm just trying to think about kind of how we map. But that's a total number, right? Don't we pay for half of these projects?
We have our baseline reimbursement for accelerated repair projects is 61%. So we'd be getting 61 reimbursement of eligible costs for these two projects. So in the end, with ineligible costs, we're usually right around somewhere between 50 and 60% on these accelerated repair program projects.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a feel for whether, to Nate's point, like whether we're kind of, because there is this thing at the state level where people say, oh, that's so much to Boston. And it's like, well, we're also a 10th of the state. So trying to get a feel for whether we're kind of in this new world in which they have a very competitive application cycle, are we getting kind of a proportionate amount? Nate, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I would just say it's a great question. And I do think that is an answerable question. I think what we can do is, for sort of future hearings on MSBA, just come with our overall sort of what we think of Boston's share. I think as Brian and I start to work on the capital budget, we're thinking about our internal equity analysis and how projects are selected based on sort of the urgency of the capital needs for the building, but also then the overall student needs. We can apply that to some of the state data and come back to you with that, sometime later this year.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great. And I also think if we could go back to the 2019 cycle and kind of look at where the cost estimates have actually come in, because I just suspect if it's actually like 6 million and then we're getting state reimbursement at like 3, then it feels like we might actually be like kind of one project behind where we should be in terms of proportionality. So just wanted to flag that. I see Councillor Edwards' hand is up, so I'm going to go to her. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure I understood the process a little bit better. The city of Boston approaches the state for this funding and specifically says it just wants it for upgrades, or is the grant funding only for upgrades of certain kinds?
So the MSBA has 2 programs. One is CORE, which is for the larger projects like Dearborn, BAA, and Cotter. And the accelerated repair program is specifically for roof, window, and boiler projects. So we identify schools that have issues with those 3 building systems that meet the criteria for the MSBA program, and we submit them to the MSBA for consideration.
Okay, so only for roof, window, and boiler. Okay, and you mentioned there were 2 programs you mentioned at this time? There was the...
Sorry. They have the CORE program, which is for larger new builds, major renovations, and then the accelerated repair program.
Okay, and so we're under this application is just the accelerated repair program. Okay, correct. So I still want to know, in terms of the CORE program, what is the criteria for the city of Boston to apply for that funding? And I asked this, and I'll give you the context as to why. One of the infrastructure build outs that we want and think we absolutely need, and is a matter of equity in East Boston, is HEPA filters in our classrooms, specifically to deal with the micro or the some of the fallout. I'm forgetting the scientific term for the pollutants and issues that fall from the sky, specifically from airplanes. And East Boston, as you know, is the neighborhood where the airport is. And so it's been shown, it regularly showers on all of us. It impacts kids' learning, it impacts our ability, our health. That is not in dispute. And so one of the filter systems that actually help to remove them is, they're called ultra-fine particulates. And one of the health systems or systems that have been proven to help remove them and reduce them are HEPA filters. And so I would like to see the city of Boston acknowledge that there's a concern, and that when it comes to our schools, that there should be a system set up to make sure that we have that in there. And I would like to know if the city of Boston would be planning to apply for then that larger core funding to help us get HEPA filters in all of our public schools, especially in East Boston.
I think if we were to move, I don't know if the MSBA looks at kind of individual schools. The application process is for an individual school, and the core program usually focuses on projects that are either complete renovations of an existing school building or a new build. The MSBA programs currently don't have that. They haven't generally, and I don't know of any in the past where they've done like a middle of the road repair project or renovation project that doesn't kind of totally transform the building. I'm not saying by any means these aren't needed. MSBA would probably not be the program to utilize for that type of improvement throughout East Boston schools. So we'd look to identify another means of exploring that type of work in the building.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to put that out there. I do think it's worth it, since equity was coming up, since we were discussing I think it's Councilor Flaherty discussed our school fleet, and just to know that my fleet over in East Boston is particularly burdened by these ultrafine particulates. So are my kids, and it impacts their learning. It is easily absorbed into brains of children 2 to 3 years old because of the way that their skulls and the way that their bodies are still developing. So we are polluting. The airport is polluting, the kids in East Boston particularly. And I want to make sure that we are, as a school system, acknowledging that first and foremost. When you go to think about infrastructure build out, I don't know that HEPA filters could be included in the boiler analysis or window analysis, but I do think it's worth figuring out, especially by this budget cycle, what form of funding the city of Boston could be seeking to help with the equity and the learning and the health of the kids in East Boston. So I appreciate that, Councilor Bach. I appreciate your patience for letting me come back in and out and then flagging me. Sorry.
No, thank you, Councilor Edwards. And I see that Carlton's got his hand up, so I wanted to give him a chance to respond as well.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to add to the part of the ultrafine particulates. That issue came up with the JQUS, the Josiah Quincy Upper School building, which is, as you probably know, is right on Mass Pike, or to be built right on Mass Pike. And so that building, that design did incorporate the HEPA level 4 filters for that exact same reason. So so I can't speak to a wholesale renovation with your East Boston schools, but certainly when we have schools that, if there is such a renovation where we are getting into the HVAC system, that is one of the considerations that we do look at. And so, I can take that back to the team saying, if we are doing a whole scale renovation in East Boston and something else has not happened through our regular capital funds, which would be another way to finance that type of effort, that we would make sure that we look at the ultrafine particulate issue and try to mitigate that situation to the extent that we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Carlton. No, I think I was thinking about the JQUS example, and I think Chinatown is a community that's been especially aware of this ultra fine particulate issue, and frankly, a lot of the groundbreaking study that's been done on the topic has been done out of Tufts right there. And so I feel like that did get flagged for JQUS, and I think Councilor Edwards raises a good point. And in many ways, it would be good if we have so many school buildings actually that are close to highways, which also generate these in addition to the airport. And it would be good for this to become a kind of like building and renovation standard of BPS instead of something that has to be raised kind of neighborhood by neighborhood. And I think that's important too, because frankly, like the state, like MEMA's not catching up yet. There's no like state level environmental requirements around the ultrafine thing. So I remember advocating for them to have at least like MERV 13 filters at a building, a set of residential buildings over the highway and in Boston. And the state doesn't come in because the state has not decided to speak to this on a regulatory basis. So it's kind of something that we have to, I think, run ahead of them on in terms of the science. So.
And actually, I just realized I misspoke. I said HEPA level 4. It was actually MERV 14. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, I remember asking you guys at that last hearing if we were at MERV 13, and I was happy we were at 14. So, Councilor Edwards.
Oh, sorry. If I could, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, one of the things that we're talking about in our operating budget and that we're going to be presenting on our capital budget is everything geared around this idea of return, recover, and reimagine for BPS. And I think in terms of the questions about both returning and recovery, we've asked ourselves these difficult questions around what are the buildings that our students need so that we are in some ways pandemic proof from the next time that we go through the situation. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the things that I've learned that I think is going to be really difficult as a community is a lot of our buildings are not able to be upgraded around HVAC and filtration systems. That really what we're talking about is how do we upgrade our standards and then go towards new builds or major renovations. And I think that's the part that's going to be really difficult is we did $7 million in window repairs this year to get our buildings sort of ready for students to return. But when we talk about Build BPS and we start talking about our capital planning going forward, it's going to be paving a path and sort of launching a new predictable pattern of upgrades and building replacements. And I think, Councilor Edwards, you're feeling it most. I think East Boston is the neighborhood that has the average oldest building stock. And when you mentioned the airport and some of the particular concerns around that tells us we need to be thinking about how do we really get into a new pattern of major renovations or new buildings. And that's something that Brian and I are really excited about launching. And of course, I'm always reminded of the old saying, right? The best day to plant a new tree was 20 years ago. The next best day is today. What we need to be doing is planting new trees throughout the city. And it's going to take concerted and disciplined effort to focus on those projects and really get them started so that, if we have to go through this experience again, that we're not dealing with so many buildings that were built during the last pandemic.
Thank you, Nate. Councilor Edwards, your hand was still up. Did you have a follow-up or?
Yeah, just really quick, specifically to Nate's point about planting new trees. I do know that we're planning on doing 2 new build outs in East Boston, one in East Boston with on the Paris Street, specifically with the Otis. So I'm hoping that's a commitment to have HEPA filters in that build out. And then also, I know we're doing a study on the Edwards in Charlestown, specifically on trying to make sure, and I believe we have your commitment to this day, that it will be an educational facility and that we're studying that, but also just to kind of put in, then part of the study should be then the HEPA filters and infrastructure that goes a part of that as well. I know we have modular classes for the Warren Prescott to compensate for the lack of space. Obviously, I think there's going to be a marrying of the space, the Edwards with the Warren Prescott. Again, just when we go to build out, I guess I'm asking for a commitment that the HEPA filter and the analysis will be part of both. One over at the Paris Street, where I know it's going to be a wonderful build out. We're all waiting for it. And then over at the Edwards.
I don't want to commit to any specific technology just because I'm not anywhere close to the expert in that. But I think air filtration, nursing suites, all of the things that we ran into challenges this year, I think size of classrooms and the layout of the school needs to be sort of, we need to have a building program that addresses things like health and pandemic readiness in the way that before this, we were talking a lot about school safety because the things that we were concerned about had to do with sort of active shooter drills. And so we were thinking about the layout of school buildings. This is now another factor. And I think the Edwards building and the Paris Street project are both real, near-term opportunities for us to do our first sort of version of that. So you definitely have our commitment to have airflow and health and safety be a massive part of how we consider and evaluate that project.
I think the only other thing I would follow up with, and thank you for that, is what I've been asking for, I think, since I got in office, which is really a push for acknowledging, which you already are, which is about the equity issue. This is about equity issue, and it's also an environmental justice issue, which we are seeing, right? The neighborhoods East Boston, those neighborhoods that have highways through them. Specifically, these are equity and environmental justice issues. How we leverage, then the question I have had is, why aren't we leveraging more private dollars and partnerships and the amount of development that's going on, especially in East Boston and Chinatown and downtown, to make them pay for, or to get BPS to get some of that money to help pay for this infrastructure build out. I would love, honestly, that analysis that Councilor Bach had asked for, like, how much does it cost? What does it look like to retrofit these things? Because I think we're not utilized enough as councilors to go to these private developers and say, you know what, whereas BPS may not be able to do it, I have no problem shaking down a developer for helping to mitigate the health implications and the health impacts of my kids, and helping to make sure that they're educated in the safest environment as possible. And so I know we're trying to work with Suffolk Downs. We were trying to work, but that's far, 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 far away from us in terms of, before we have a middle school up there, or whatever school we're going to build up there. But I mean, every single day, in as much as people are moving and building, and oftentimes their building and construction is one of the lead causes of climate issues and carbon in our environment. Why aren't we, and why isn't BPS pushing for more and from private dollars? I love that you're pushing for more from the state, but the state's going to deal with the deficit shortly, and we might that the opportunity may not come up. But private dollars, the amount of money that's being made, $9 billion worth of construction projects here, I just want to see more price tags and that you utilize more of us.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I definitely think that the BPS has not been organized to leverage those resources in the same way that, before all the hard work of Carlton and Brian and the PFD team and the mayor's office we weren't in a position to leverage the accelerated repair program from MSBA. I think what you're highlighting is, as we get more organized and get our building schedule and our facilities master plan really laid out, so you can see this is where we want to go over 10 years, that then opens the door for us to go to private developers, other people who are private philanthropy who want to see us upgrade our buildings and know what they're getting for the next million, 2 million, 20 million, however many million you're going to shake down people in East Boston to help us.
I'm good. I'm good. I would also just point to then the other institutions that are not in the room, which are the ones that are supposed to be pilot payments as well. So how we direct some of that money towards either our public institutions or our educational facilities. So looking at colleges, universities, and some nonprofits. I'll stop there, Councilor Bach. I know Councilor Braden is waiting. So thank you so much for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. No, and I would strongly second. I think that when we talk about mitigation and development projects, we're frequently saying, oh, you're going to add a bunch of apartments here, so could you help support the park that's across the way that everyone who lives here is going to use? But we're not well set up as counselors to also have the conversation about those public school infrastructure that complements these communities that folks are building. And I think that's it's actually on my to-do list to talk to you about that, Nate, anyways. So, but just would strongly second. I see Councilor Braden's been waiting patiently, as alluded to. So, Councilor Braden.
No, I feel that this hearing's focused on East Boston schools, but this is a big issue for all of us. I wanted to make sure, and I will continue to play this tune until I get where I need to get. The Jackson Man Elementary and the Horace Mann School for the Deaf are slated to they were supposed to close this June, but we've got another year. I just really feel that it's very, very urgent that we make sure that we have feasibility studies in this year's budget, the 2022 budget, to set up the planning and get the runway prepared so that we can, when those schools close, that we have a solid plan to kick off the rebuilding and or relocation of those schools when the time comes, and that we can expedite that process, because the Horace Mann School for the Deaf is actually been temporarily housed at the Jackson Man complex for 50 years. And the building is about to fall down. And when we talk about older buildings, many of the older buildings are solid, well-built buildings. And Jackson Man is one of the more new schools in our district, and it's been closed. It's been condemned and as needing to be closed next year. So it's really of vital importance that we get that kicked off. And I want to see that commitment in this year's budget, you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say a couple quick notes. The building is, we have announced that we do need to close the Jackson Man building. We do feel confident that the building is safe beyond actually next June. We think the HVAC repairs were the big concern, and we continue to monitor the roof. So the building does need to be closed and is not in good condition, but we don't, it's not yet condemned. The finding swing space for the Horace Mann School is our #1 priority. It's something that we've been working with the community on. We have not found a viable solution that both the district and the school agree on, but we are actively working on that and hope to have resolution here in the near future. And then you will see money. We have talked with the Horace Mann community about a future permanent home for them. And then depending on the swing space and where it is, we'll then start to set the timeline for how quickly we move on that. And we're thinking about a partnership with the MSBA on it because it is such a unique project. But, I know that there's a lot of frustration and rightfully and justifiably from the Horace Mann community about how slow we've been, but it is our biggest priority. And then you're exactly right. Brian and partnering with the facilities department are really focused on what we're calling a facilities condition index, which is an objective measure of each of the school buildings so that we don't get caught off guard by a building like the Jackson Man. And so that we can be very transparent with the community about what the condition of all their buildings are and what we anticipate for the future in terms of upgrades and repairs that are needed for each of the buildings. So that's going to get us out of the issue that came up with the Jackson Man and the issue that we dealt with the West Roxbury Education Complex, which was we were dealing with a building emergency that has set us back in terms of our planning for Build BPS overall. And we're certainly working very quickly because that kind of disruption is not acceptable and not okay for community. So I appreciate your advocacy on that and look forward to updates for the community here.
Yeah. I'll see if we can set up an appointment to have you and Brian to talk this through a bit more. The other issue really is, it's sort of shocking to think that two schools that were built in the 70s are really slated to be demolished. One of them is already condemned, and the other is slated to be demolished, or in the fairly near future. I hope that when we build new schools, that we're building them to a standard that will guarantee a life cycle of like 70 years or 100 years. We don't, maybe that's ambitious, but I really feel we should be building buildings that will stand and last for a long time and not cut corners and build good, solid buildings for the future. So that's just my comment. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. As a district councillor, I now, of course, want to be like, well, in my district, the two McKinley schools that are in the district need a lot of help. And I think are both actually sites that really call for a kind of reimagining and have a lot of space around them with their parking lots. And I just think, that we're really not where we need to be there in terms of serving those kids and in terms of serving my neighborhoods, which don't have any neighborhood elementary or middle school. I think the Tobin was the beneficiary of one of these MSBA grants, but has other systems still in need. And I do hear you, Nate, on the point that, you can upgrade an HVAC system, but you can't magic an HVAC system into a school that doesn't have basic infrastructure for HVAC built into it, right? And I think that's a lot of what we've been dealing with this year. So in my district, that's, I think it's the bigger question is the paucity of elementary and middle school resources. And then even the ones that we have are really not, they're not up to snuff. But we didn't bring you here today for the district counselors all school building capital project hearing, so I won't go further on mine. But I just wanted to circle back on one more thing related to the topic at hand, which is, and it's a little bit deja vu. It's come up in the last two of these, I think, that we've had, Carlton. But so my understanding is that the state's going to assign us the OPM, right? We don't do a typical contracting thing for that. But then when we actually do these projects, we do, right? We do a traditional bidding, 30B bidding process.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Or the design team.
So for the design, the OPM and architect for ARPs are assigned by the MSBA. They do their own procurement, and they assign all districts that move forward into the accelerated repair program with an OPM and architect. When the project's ready to bid, then the Public Facilities Department will oversee the bidding of the project.
Right. And so one of the things that I've said before, but that I really want to stress, and there's kind of a new angle on it today, but is that in the ARP program, Councilor Edwards alluded to the fact that it's limited and that it's just for these three things, right? Windows, boilers, roofs. But to me, the fact that it's for these three things also means that like we really should be cultivating an ecosystem in the city of Boston of ideally like, people of color owned, like women owned, like employing local Boston resident, like firms that can do these jobs, because there is something a little bit cookie cutter about them. I mean, obviously the window thing, everybody's got to figure it out for each building. But in terms of like, you could, if we had a locally grown ecosystem, we're going to have window, roof, and boiler projects from now until eternity. Like, so it just feels like a space where we could really cultivate a sort of, economic development, Office of Workforce Development, working with BPS, kind of like, what do you have to do to be a really good competitive bidder in this space? Such that when we put those things out to bid in the state ecosystem, those are the people who get it. And what made me think of it in particular, Brian, today was your comment about the windows. The idea that we know ahead of time that window projects can take, through 2 summers because of the finickiness of fitting. I'm like, well, why are we not like encouraging, somebody to become in the city of Boston, like the best finicky school building window fitter company. And then you've got the advantage of being like, oh, everyone else in the state, it takes them 2 summers, but there's this like Cracker Jack shop in Boston, that is an opportunity to be, a minority owned business and then also just gets really great at this thing. I just think that wherever this has come up in other sides of things around the conservation core idea I'm pushing, but wherever we, the city, are creating a demand pipeline, I just think that our like other aspects of the city need to be working on a supply pipeline for that work so that we don't just sort of passively wait, because we know when we passively wait for the lowest bidder on the state, like within the confines of a state process, that like we don't get the kind of diversity, we don't get the kind of local contractors. So this is something we've brought up a few times. I don't really feel like we've made a lot of progress on it, but I did want to raise it today and see if any of you had any comments or thoughts. Carlton, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in anticipation of today's meeting, I kind of was thinking about it because I know the last 2 times we've talked, this has been discussed and we haven't really moved forward. And so I'm thinking, so what is the action step? How do we actually move forward with this? Because I think it's a great idea. I do want to caution you with the Windows example. Windows is a little bit peculiar. You have to literally design it before you can begin to build it. And that just unfortunately takes a long time. But certainly for our other projects, and even to that extent, the Windows projects, we need to be able to build that pipeline. So I was thinking, what is the next step? So I think the next step might be, so realizing we're all in our own respective roles, but it might be something that the council might be able to put together a task force or a study group or something where your thoughts and our thoughts can come together. We can discuss the matter and literally brainstorm a way through. I think if we try to do it individually, we're going to be missing out on certain pieces, quite frankly. So we'd want to have the benefit of your expertise and your thoughts on the matter, and then our expertise and our thoughts on the matter to how we can do this within the procurement laws, which we have to be mindful of course. So I think that'd be a great idea, but I'd have to work with Chief Brophy maybe to possibly connect with your office, or I know it was Councilor Miha's office.
He is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So maybe we can put together a think tank or a group or whatever you want to call it, but a group of us together so we can think it through, because I definitely think you're in the right space about what should happen, and we could benefit because we do sometimes go, oh, here we go, low bid. So,
Right. Yeah. No, I think I think let's do that. I will commit to pulling a group together. I think it's both, our insight and then the cross departmental aspect, right? And then just kind of like saying, let's get this done. Because I think that's the problem, is that I think a great frustration for people is the fact that that we operate within state procurement laws. We're so often tied to the lowest bid. And then people say, well, it seems like you're not prioritizing picking the contractors, the local contractors, minority owned contractors, et cetera. And I just think that, and then, the folks internal to whatever department who are running the bid are like, look, within the constraints of the legal bidding process, this is what I'm stuck with. And I just think the way out is being proactive, and you can't proactively cultivate an ecosystem of like diverse and local potential bidders for every need that the city has. But when you see one that the city has consistently that moves a lot of money and is something that we like genuinely need and are going to continue to genuinely need for decades and decades to come, like that's the place to be like, all right, so how do we cultivate that ecosystem? So yes, so let's do it, Carlton. Let's have an actual sort of pull together a task force on this, because I think it's the right step forward. And I think those are all of my questions for today. I should say that I'm definitely going to be recommending tomorrow that this appropriation be approved by the council, so that the design we can get the OPM team and you guys can get moving forward. And I know, as Councilor Edwards has articulated, that this work is urgent to the East Boston schools, the Adams and the Kennedy. And I also want to flag that, of course, as soon as that process for the SOI process for the next round starts up, we'll want you to keep us informed of that and try to expedite it through. It sounds like it's going to hit in the middle of budget season, so we may have to shoehorn it into the budget hearing calendar. But of course, we stand ready to do that, because it's very important for us to get these resources maximized.
Yeah, we'll be back Councilor, we'll be back before you with schools to submit this year prior to submitting to the MSBA for your vote and approval.
Great. We'll look forward to that. Councilor Braden, your hand's still up. Did you have another question?
No, I have no further questions. I just want to thank everyone, and I've learned a lot this morning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Braden. I think Councilor Edwards had to step away, but also wanted to convey her thanks, and all of the councilors. So I'll be recommending this. We will follow up. I would like some just back of the envelope sense on that proportionality question, looking back the last few years. Because I do want to make sure that I don't want it to be that there was this bubble where we did really well by the MSBA, or the MSBA did well by us, and then it kind of subsides now that we've got more people in the pipeline. So want to pay good attention to that. Plus, maybe at some point we need to get another penny added onto that resource. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And with that, this hearing of the Ways and Means Committee is adjourned. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.